Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of the Brewery, I'll be discussing my very spicy take on the backside commander from Kaldheim, the Prismatic Bridge. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. The best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. For just $1, patrons get early access to certain videos on YouTube, while higher tier patrons get access to the VIP section of my Discord server as well. You can find a link to both down in the description. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. Alright, let's get back to the episode. The Prismatic Bridge is a legendary enchantment that costs 1 white, 1 blue, 1 green, 1 red, and 1 black. At the beginning of your upkeep, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker. You then cheat them onto the battlefield and shuffle the revealed cards to the bottom of the library. This enchantment is the backside of a Sika, god of the tree. However, this deck will never cast the card as a Sika. In fact, the deck isn't really going to abuse the Prismatic Bridge either. This deck aims to use the Prismatic Bridge as a way to consistently acquire the actual commander of the deck, which is neither a creature nor a planeswalker. Since the Prismatic Bridge is essentially a polymorph ability, the deck has two specific targets for it, Runescarred Demon and Tesseret the Seeker. The Demon will get the true commander of the deck, while Tesseret gets the main support card for it, and that Seeker commander is Enduring Ideal. This spell is quite costly at 7 mana, but once you cast it, it copies itself at the beginning of each of your upkeeps. That means that each of your upkeeps you get to cheat an enchantment onto the battlefield straight from your library. The only downside to this is being unable to cast any spells for the rest of the game. However, once Epic has been achieved, it's almost impossible to deal with save for a couple of very niche situations. I've been waiting years to be able to build a consistent 5-color Enduring Ideal commander deck. While it's always a seemingly glass cannon of a deck to rely on a card that is not in the command zone in a commander game, the deck can still work sufficiently well without it, but I'll explain why later on. In any case, the main point of the deck is to get Enduring Ideal into your hand as quickly as possible in order to cast it as quickly as possible. On top of that, copy it as often as possible, which is where Tesseret comes in. Tesseret can cheat in Twinning Staff straight from your deck. With the way Epic works, since each upkeep you're copying Enduring Ideal, this will be recognized by Twinning Staff. So with Twinning Staff on the battlefield, you actually get 2 copies of Enduring Ideal each upkeep. If that weren't enough, you can also activate the staff while the Enduring Ideal copy is on the stack to copy it again. That'll give you 2 additional Enduring Ideal copies on the stack for a total of 4. You can now see why Tesseret is the Prismatic Bridge's second ideal target. If that weren't enough, if you're in a control-heavy pod, you can also use Tesseret to cheat in Expedition Map first. You might miss out on getting the staff onto the battlefield to get 2 Enduring Ideals each upkeep for 0 mana, but at least you can crack Expedition Map to get Boseiju Who Shelters all into your hand. That way you can play it that turn and then wait until your next turn to cast Enduring Ideal without worrying about it getting countered. So the way you use Tesseret that same turn he hits the battlefield depends on which commanders you're going up against. Also, be careful with Opposition Agent. Either way, everything in the deck is synergistic, so if anyone does Opposition Agent you, they won't get anything too useful from them, and they won't set you too far behind, unless they look at your entire deck and take Enduring Ideal away. In that case, that's where player removal comes into effect. Due to this being a 5-color Enduring Ideal deck, we have access to any enchantment currently legal in the Commander format and all of the hijinxes that your imagination can fathom. Thus, this deck is by no means the only way nor the best way to abuse this epic trigger, no pun intended. This is just the way I built this deck from my own idea. That being said, I believe that the best way to make the most out of Enduring Ideal is by multiplying its effect as often as possible during your turn, as well as protecting yourself and your board state. Apart from that, you can do with my idea what your heart desires. So let's first see what other copy effects I put in here besides Twinning Staff. Lithoform Engine and Psionic Resonator can be used to copy the upkeep trigger. This means that you get 2 instances of Enduring Ideal's tutoring ability if you activate either of these artifacts. Lithoform Engine is even better since it can also be used to copy Enduring Ideal itself. If you copy Enduring Ideal, that means that you also copy its epic trigger. If you manage to have enough mana to pull this off, you get 2 copies of Enduring Ideal each upkeep. Granted, copying Enduring Ideal after casting it is a bit far-fetched due to the mana intensity. You need 10 mana total for it. But the fact remains that for just 2 generic mana and tapping, you can copy the epic trigger. You can still use the copy ability to copy the Enduring Ideal copy itself when it's on the stack, but that costs 1 more generic mana to do so. So you might as well just copy the epic trigger instead, since it's cheaper. Speaking of which, dual casting can also be used to copy the Enduring Ideal copy when it's on the stack, since it's technically a sorcery on the stack that you control. The best thing about dual casting is that it's an enchantment, so if you cheated it onto the battlefield attached to a creature without summoning Sickness, you're now able to copy any future copies of Enduring Ideal for just 1 red mana and tapping the creature. This is much easier to pull off than the previous 2 artifacts, since you won't be able to cast them after going epic if you didn't do so beforehand. However, since the deck is able to function if Enduring Ideal gets dealt with, they're so useful in the deck to copy other triggered effects in it. Copy Artifact is another enchantment that can be cheated onto the battlefield in order to keep copying Enduring Ideal. Recall that the Prismatic Bridge has a 50% chance of cheating Tesseract onto the battlefield with its first trigger, and Tesseract is used to get Twinning Staff if you're not worried about Enduring Ideal getting countered. Therefore, if you go Epic, you can use Copy Artifact to enter as a copy of Twinning Staff and thus get more free copies of Enduring Ideal each of your upkeeps. If you're gonna get this one, get the IC edition since it's way cheaper in comparison. Speaking of each of your upkeeps, Paradox Haze gives you an additional upkeep. Obviously, we're going to enchant ourselves with it. Getting another upkeep means that we get another epic trigger during our turn. Now, what I love most about this deck is all the math involved. I am partial to mathematical decks like these since I am a mathematician myself, and math's not only for blockers, but for spicy brewers as well. If you have Twinning Staff on the battlefield before you cast Enduring Ideal, you get 2 Enduring Ideals each upkeep. If you have Paradox Haze, you now get 4 epic triggers during each of your turns. However, you don't need much math at just 4 copies. But what if we copy Paradox Haze with future Enduring Ideal copies? Copy Enchantment, Esther's Invocation, and Mirror Maid can copy any enchantment but are primarily used to copy Paradox Haze. Once we have our board state protected, which I'm going to explain how soon, if we have multiple epic triggers during an upkeep, we can then use those triggers to Paradox Haze on the battlefield and then copy it with these 3 enchantments. Mirror Maid can also copy artifacts, so you can use it to copy Twinning Staff as well and double down further on copying epic triggers if you want to use it that way. But having all 4 of these means we get 5 upkeep phases during each of our turns. If you were keeping track, if we were getting 2 epic triggers each upkeep with just Twinning Staff, with these 4 enchantments as well as the staff, we're getting 10 epic triggers during each of our turns. And this is without counting any additional way we're copying Enduring Ideal's copy on the stack. If you use Mirror Maid and copy Artifact to copy Twinning Staff, the count is even higher. 4 upkeeps with 3 Twinning Staff effects each means that we get a total of 24 epic triggers during each of our turns. That's just insane. Once we have this many epic triggers in a turn, you can tutor for your win cons or for any other janky things. As I mentioned earlier, your imagination is the limit with what you can do with this shell. Speaking of, let's see the other half of the shell I recommend you run. We just saw how to copy Enduring Ideal and or its epic trigger. Now let's see how to protect our board state in order to set up the subsequent insanity. City of Solitude prevents anyone from casting spells or activating abilities during our turn, so this is pretty clutch at helping us not worry about opponents interacting during our turn. This is definitely one of the first enchantments you should look for with one of Enduring Ideal's copies. If City of Solitude enters the battlefield, their only window to respond to it closes. The second enchantment you should look for is Dovescape. It can counter any non-creature spell. That player does get X11 flyers where X is the converted mana cost, but that's not an issue if we're preventing players casting anything that wipes the board of permanents or enchantments. So things like Austere Command, Planar Cleansing, and Overloaded Cyclonic Rift, etc. get countered. This doesn't affect us since we're not casting copies of Enduring Ideal. They simply appear in the stack, so we're not affected by it. Only opponents are. At least with these 2 enchantments to start with, makes it incredibly difficult for opponents to begin dealing with our board state. Afterwards, we can further protect our board state with Sterling Grove, Privileged Position, and Greater Aromancy. Not all targeted removal effects are on non-creature spells. There are plenty of creatures that can do so. These 3 enchantments give our other enchantments Hexproof and or Shroud. Since they don't affect themselves, having at least 2 of them on the battlefield means that they protect each other. These further strengthen our board from any responses. Leyline of Sanctity and Spirit of Resistance in turn protects us from the same things. Getting a lot of 1/1 flyers from Dovescape might inspire opponents to get rid of our board state with the classic player removal. However, since the Prismatic Bridge is 5 colors, Spirit of Resistance is going to prevent all damage dealt to us, thus rendering their birds ineffective as attackers. The Leyline gives us hexproof so they can't target us with effects that might make us sacrifice anything, mill, or do anything else we don't want, at least from targeted effects. Stranglehold prevents them from tutoring through their library for any responses they might have, especially niche ones because you never know. As a bonus, it also prevents opponents from getting extra turns. It also stops them from ramping, so it also makes their game even slower to keep them behind and further incapable of dealing with us. Along a similar vein but a bit more evil is Consulate Crackdown and Fall of the Thran. The former can be used to exile away their mana rocks as well as their other artifacts, while the latter straight up blows up the field of lands. If opponents don't have any lands, they can't pay for spells or effects against us. It also destroys our own lands, but we don't need lands when we're cheating in enchantments anyways. With each draw step, players can recover 2 lands, but that's not nearly fast enough to do anything against us. Now, if opponents were able to respond to our initial attempts of blocking away our board from interaction, both Nylea, Enhanced Surveillance, and Hall of Helios Generosity can go around that. The first 2 are enchantments that can help in getting things back into our library from the graveyard, especially any destroyed enchantments. Unfortunately, Enhanced Surveillance can only be done once because it requires exiling to activate, but the bow can recover up to 4 enchantments at a time. They are bottom deck, but it doesn't matter since Enduring Ideal looks through our entire library anyways. Hall of Helios Generosity isn't an enchantment, but it is a land, meaning that we can play it after we've gone epic. It can be used to recover one enchantment from the graveyard. Once it's on top of our library, we can get it with Enduring Ideal. We can also use Expedition Map to get it thanks to Tesseract if he manages to stick around. Oblivion Ring and Vanishing Light are included to get rid of any non-land permanents that might prevent us from winning the game, specifically cards that literally say we can't win the game or opponents can't lose the game. Once we have a lock on our board, we're unable to be interacted with, but opponents can still do similar hijinks of their own. These put a stop to that. Okay, so now that we've protected our board and subsequently multiplied our epic triggers afterwards, how do we win? Well, here's where your imagination takes over. How do you want to abuse Enduring Ideal with my shell? If you want some ideas, let me show you the rest of my deck. We can win very easily thanks to Doubling Season, Assemble the Legion, and Impact Tremors. The interaction between Doubling Season and Assemble the Legion is amazing. Thanks to Doubling Season, Assemble the Legion gets 2 muster counters each upkeep instead of 1. It then creates twice as many hasty 1/1s that it would due to Doubling Season itself too. So the first time it triggers, it gets 2 counters and then creates 4 1/1 soldiers with haste. The next time it triggers, it gets 2 more counters and then creates 8 1/1 soldiers with haste. If we cheat these enchantments onto the battlefield once we have 5 upkeep steps, we're going to start our pre-combat phase with a total of 60 hasty 1/1s. Now, them having haste is irrelevant at this point thanks to Impact Tremors. We might not even get to the 5th upkeep since each soldier entering gives 1 damage to all of our opponents. However, if any opponent has been gaining life like crazy and actually survives getting burned for 60 damage from Impact Tremors, just send those 60 soldiers their way. Another way to win is a bit jankier and actually kills 2 birds with 1 stone because I also wanted to brew a Shrine Tribal deck back when Core Set 2021 was fully spoiled, and that's thanks to Sanctum of All. Each upkeep you get to search your library and cheat in a shrine card as if it was another Enduring Ideal, just limited to shrines. Thus it follows that the deck is running the rest of the shrines, which are 10 more in total. Not all shrines are created equal, but since they do serve to power the other shrines, they're included. Sanctum of All doesn't just cheat in shrines from our library, but it also has them trigger twice if we control 6 or more shrines. So if we have multiple upkeeps, we can trigger these shrines even more times. Well, at least the ones that trigger during our upkeep, which are the Honden. These are the best ones for the deck, so let's take a quick look at them in detail. Honden of Cleansing Fire isn't that important to get out first since it just gains us life each upkeep. Unless we're really down in life, we should leave this one for one of the last ones. It's not entirely useless though, as I mentioned earlier, at least works to power our other shrines. Honden of Infinite Rage unfortunately doesn't hit all opponents, but at least it can help in dealing damage to each opponent during each of our upkeeps if we want to spread the pain around. At least thanks to Sanctum of All, it's also possible to trigger this twice each upkeep, which can definitely spell doom for our opponents. Honden of Life's Web is possibly one of the best ones thanks to the interaction between Doubling Season and or Impact Tremors. This thing creates a ton of snakes. These can be used to attack in later turns, chump block, or trigger Impact Tremors as mentioned earlier. Honden of Night's Reach is also one of the better ones since it can empty our opponent's hands of cards. Not that they'll be able to cast anything during our turn if we still have City of Solitude around, but at least it shuts them out of the game even further. Honden of Seeing Winds is a bit of a double-edged sword in the deck. We don't want to draw cards because we can't cast spells. We want to cheat them onto the battlefield with either Enduring Ideal or, in this case, Sanctum of All. The only thing we want to do is draw into lands. The deck does have ways to circumvent this problem though, which I'll get into in a bit. The other 5 shrines in the deck are the Sanctums, which don't trigger during our upkeep, so they're not as good in the deck as a Honden. That being said, they're still useful. Sanctum of Calm Waters is another shrine that has us draw cards, but at least it's not obligatory to do so we don't have to worry too much about it if we're epic. That being said, if Enduring Ideal is dealt with, then Honden of Seeing Winds and this Sanctum will help us tremendously to keep our hand full. Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest adds X mana to our mana pool, but it does so during our pre-combat main phase. We can't really use that mana there since we're unable to cast anything, but at least we can activate anything there like Hall of Helios Generosity, Bow of Nylea, etc. Sanctum of Shattering Heights isn't as useless as it seems in this deck. As I've already mentioned, we don't have to worry that much about mana once we start going off. So we can turn lands in our hand that we don't need into missiles that can take out any annoying creatures or planeswalkers. That way we can save our Oblivion Ring effects for other card types. That being said, it would have been amazing if this could also hit players. Speaking of getting at opponents' life totals, Sanctum of Stone Fangs is perhaps the best one since it does just that. It might not trigger during our upkeep, but it does drain the table for a lot of life if we're able to have a lot of shrines on the battlefield. Keep in mind that thanks to Sanctum of All, it has the potential of triggering twice, and we can also copy its trigger with Lithoform Engine and Psionic Resonator too. Sanctum of Tranquil Light isn't as powerful as the other ones, but at least it can be used to tap down potential attackers as well as any utility creatures in a pinch. This isn't necessary if we manage to lock our board, but it is better once our situation is more dire. As for circumventing drawing into cards we don't want it to our hand, the deck's running Abundance and Hidden Retreat. Not only is Abundance amazing in ensuring we never draw into any non-land cards, thus leaving all of our enchantments into our library for Enduring Ideal to cheat onto the battlefield, but drawing into only lands also provides fuel for Sanctum of Shattering Heights. Again, super bummed that it can't hit players. Hidden Retreat is a card most of you have probably never ever seen, let alone understand just how incredibly useful it is in this particular deck. Let's say we do have some enchantments in our hand from a time we were unable to cast them before going epic. That's fine. In response to Enduring Ideal's copy on the stack, we can target that copy with Hidden Retreat. We can then activate it as many times as we can to put as many cards from our hand on top of our library as we want. It doesn't have to be a burn spell to be targeted, it just has to be an instant or sorcery. So with Enduring Ideal's copy on the stack, we can use Hidden Retreat to top deck all of the enchantments in our hand. This allows us to access them with Enduring Ideal. Pretty sweet, right? Now, Enduring Ideal is a 7-costed spell, meaning we have to be very ahead in resources to even dream about resolving this, let alone early enough before our opponents have developed their boards to a point where they're a problem to us. Due to not being able to run any mana dorks, the deck's going to have to settle for land-based acceleration such as Farseek, Nature's Lore, and 3 Visits. No surprise that my favorite trifecta is here. The best thing about them here is that they're not color intensive to cast, and the lands have the potential of entering untapped. However, we might need to ramp harder, so the deck is also running Hunting Wilds, Ranger's Path, and Skyshroud Claim, which is twice the effect for twice the mana, so the ratio is good enough. Having 5-6 of these spells only tutor for forests might seem like a problem, but the deck is running as many lands as it can that has multiple basic land types, especially the Triomes. Although these enter tapped, we can still use them to easily fix our colors. As for mana rocks, the deck's running Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Mana Vault, and Arcane Signet, as well as all 10 talismans. This might seem like making the deck weak to artifact hate, but we don't want to have all this mana all the time. We just want to be able to cast the Prismatic Bridge as quickly as possible, and then be able to cast Enduring Ideal easily enough. Either way, we won't be able to cast any of these spells once we go epic. However, the final piece of mana acceleration in the deck is Braid of Fire. This enchantment is amazing in the deck, especially once we have a ton of upkeep steps. The mana generated from it can be used to activate Twinning Staff's second ability. Doing so gives us 2 more copies of Enduring Ideal on the stack, thus getting us 2 more epic triggers. If we also have Doubling Season, then it gets 2 Age counters each time instead of just 1. This mana can also be used to pay for Lithiform Engine and Ceramic Resonator's ability, so it can take the deck epic triggers even more epic. Don't sleep on Braid of Fire here. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. The deck's running all 10 opponent lands, all 10 shock lands, all 5 Triomes, Command Tower, Ancient Tomb, and Murmuring Bosk, yet another fetchable land, as well as 1 of each snow-covered basic land in case anyone's running anything that benefits us for it. As with all my deck techs, the majority of the budget is in the mana base. In this particular case though, even though I have them, I opted out of running all 11 fetch lands and all 10 dual lands in lieu of the opponent lands and shock lands. The deck doesn't need to have such a cutthroat efficiency in mana since we're cheating most of our spells and the ramp spells have the lands enter the battlefield tapped anyways. That being said, if you're playing online or already have these lands, you can definitely swap out the opponent lands for the fetch lands and the shock lands for the original dual lands. Either way, as it stands, the deck will work just fine. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Esika God of the Tree as the Prismatic Bridge. Again, even though it might seem like a glass cannon to have your actual commander be one of the 99, especially when that commander is a sorcery, the deck does and will function if Enduring Ideal is dealt with. That being said, being able to access Enduring Ideal with relative consistency is insanity, and you only saw a small piece of it in this video. The possibilities of Enduring Ideal as your secret commander are limited only by your imagination and the commander card pool. Again, this is just how I built the deck, so hopefully you got some ideas on how to build an Enchantment Matters deck unlike anything you've ever seen before. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I'm Demented Kirby, and happy brewing.